Okay, welcome back to the presentation. Is it food safe? So just a little bit of review. Last time I went over the reasons of why I did this project. It's all because of COVID. People quarantine at home. They wanted to make cookie cutters and things for their kids, and then some people, actually a lot of people, made face shields and masks and ear savers, and the question arose, can you sanitize 3D printed parts? The answer is yes. You can sanitize them, but is it food safe is a different subject, because you ain't going to be eating out of your mask or your face shield. I sure hope not. But sanitizing does go hand in hand with food safety, so that's why it's important to understand those first few slides. Because if you can sanitize it, then at least it's food safe in that category. Then what we're going to do after proving that it can be sanitized or not sanitized, which I've already proven it can be, and I'm going to continue to prove that, to make it food safe, we need to check what the additives and the contamination in the filament are. That is for a future video, so let's focus on the middle section here. Okay, when it comes to food safety and viruses and bacteria, especially when it comes to filtration, and yes, filtration is important with food safety. You want to make sure your plastics, this is kind of a hard concept, but we do test plastics and materials that are food for the food industry for filtration in a way. It's volumetric flux or volumetric flow. So that's kind of what this section is about. There's something called the Psi function. Some people read it PSI, which they think pounds per square inch, which in this case it's not. It's the Psi function, or the Streamline function if you want to look it up on Wikipedia. And what it is if you have a line, it's in fluid dynamics, it's the difference between the stream function values at any 2 points gives the volumetric flow rate or the volumetric flux through the line connecting those 2 points. So you have point A, point B on a line. You have a material in the middle, and it's calculating the volumetric flow between point A and point B. You don't have to have a material there, but you can. So that's all the stream function is doing. And so obviously for us, I'm always going to have a material there. That's what I'm testing. And then you have something called Brownian Motion, which is the study of particle motion suspended in a medium such as liquid or gas. And this relates to the streamline function, psi, because Brownian motion is based on a diffusion principle and volumetric flow. What it means, so if we look here to the left, these are all the equations. There's some of them that you have to use. I know them all. I know how they work. The streamline function is the top one. It's the vector of u is a function or a combination of the partial derivative of psi with respect to y for the x direction, because this is for two-dimensional flow. For the y direction, it's the negative partial of psi with respect to x. Now it's interesting that when you're looking in the x direction, it has respect to y, and when you're looking in the y direction, which is in vector format is v, because it's uvw, you're looking along, you're taking the partial with respect to x. I just find that kind of interesting. Anyways, you go through your double integration, and you get at the end, you get some function that tells you how the particles and the flow rate is flowing and moving. It's kind of cool. The one below it is the Brownian motion, which is based on diffusion. And what this means, what Brownian motion is how particles of different sizes float through in our case, the air. Think of a soccer net and throwing a softball straight through it. A certain sized particle, and it happens to be 0.3 microns, will actually pass right through that net, because 0.3 are actually extremely hard to capture because they move very linearly. They move in a straight line because they almost have the same density as air itself, and so they follow that same streamline as air. So they just go wherever the pressure gradient takes them. And if it gets to something that's not the same density, it'll flow past it. And that's why some bugs don't get smashed in your windshield, because they get sucked into that streamline and up and over your car. But some who don't match that density profile get sucked right into your windshield. Same principle. So 0.3 microns is extremely hard to capture. So gowns, masks, and gloves are designed to filter out 0.3 microns at 95% because that is the hardest, most difficult to capture. So of course we want it to capture the most difficult one. I mean, it makes sense. Doesn't mean that it can't filter out anything smaller or larger. A lot of people think when they read, oh, N95 material is 95% of 0.3, so anything smaller is going to be less than 95%. That's actually completely 100% false. And I'll show here in a few minutes some filtration tests that we did, and this is all part of my internship and my project. So another thing people say is, oh, I have this mask on my face, I can smell Subway or I can smell the sulfur pit that I'm by. That means my mask isn't working. That's actually false. Reason why is the sulfur molecule is actually 300 times smaller than a virus right when we begin to smell it. It's actually 0.00004 microns in diameter. So 320 times smaller than a virus, and we can smell it. So doesn't mean that the material is not doing its job. So size does matter. People just don't realize that particle size is a huge factor in filtration. And it doesn't even have to be filtration for a mask. It can be filtration for your furnace filter. If you actually look at your furnace filter made by 3M, it'll tell you it's made from melt-blown, electrostatically charged polypropylene. That electric charge is extremely important because now, as you throw that softball straight through the net, it's statically charged, it's acting like a magnet. That softball all of a sudden gets stuck to the magnet. So, but what does this mean for particles smaller than 0.3 and larger? Well, what that means is for smaller particles, they're so small, they bounce off of other gases in the environment. And so this is why if we did breathe out a naked virus, it wouldn't matter because they bounce off of air particles. Anything smaller than 0.3 bounces around. And it's like taking that softball and bouncing it into the soccer net. You have a huge chance of hitting the net. And since it's electrostatically charged, as soon as it even touches the net, it's stuck. So, I mean, you got two things working for you on that. And with some testing that we did, below you can see with the melt-blown polypropylene, below 0.3 microns, it was 96% efficient for a particle the size of a virus. Okay? Above 0.3, it was 99% efficient. And that's where we care about, is above 0.3 microns, because remember, a virus lives in a host cell, and those host cells are much larger than 0.3 microns. I mean, the smallest aerosol we actually breathe out when we're talking is about 0.5 microns. When we cough, they're a little bit larger, but when we sneeze, they're a little bit smaller than 0.3. They're about 0.2, but I mean, you can see the results here. A cotton quilt with 120 threads per inch cotton on the front and the back with a half centimeter worth of batting in the middle. I mean, you can see how well that filters out stuff. And then a cotton single layer, you can see that, and then a single layer of cotton with silk on the back. Silk can naturally gain static electricity, and I mean, look at the results of that. And these tests weren't done just with the pressure chamber where you put the filter material in there and then pass things through. We also did it with the gold standard, which is with Petri dishes, because that's how you culture viruses and bacteria. That's how you really test for when it comes to pathogens and filtering pathogens, is using live subjects with Petri dishes and breathing, because there's no other way, and the Petri dish will not lie. it'll tell you what came out and what didn't. And then there is a mathematical formula for you to count. Okay, this is how big this colony is. This is how many bacteria is in that colony based off of the size and how much there is. It's all proportional. And then you can compare it to the infectious disease number of that bacteria or virus. I call it bacteria because it's a host cell with viruses living in it. And then you can say, hey, it's far below the infectious disease number. You're not going to get it. And that's what I love about it. That's why I love science. It's really cool. Each virus has its own, or bacteria has its own infectious disease number that if it's below that, you're not going to get sick. If it's above that, you're not going to sick. You're going to get sick. I mean, later on in the video presentation, you'll see what my shirt looked like when I did some preliminary swab testing on it. It was nasty. So I also had these numbers validated by the American Chemical Society because they did their own testing as well, and we ended up with the same numbers. In fact, our group sent our data there, and they validated it for us. So that was pretty cool. All right, moving forward, now that we have that taken care of. So let's talk about the preliminary testing, and this is where I'm going to stop on this slide, and then we'll begin again for the next video. For the preliminary testing, I wanted to test the surface and the gaps of the 3D printed parts. And I used my 3D printed mask because I had left it out. I've used it, never washed it for 3 months, and left it out. So I thought it was the perfect thing to use. Now, I love this picture because right here, this is the perfect Petri dish. Whoever made this one did a really good job. And the reason why I say that is because when you take bacteria with your little skimming hook, it's a little round ring that you dip into a broth, you move that broth back and forth into this quadrant. And then when you start this quadrant, you move back and forth, but you only go into this one 3 times, and then you stay in this quadrant. And then you do it here, and you only move into this quadrant 3 times again, and then you stay in this quadrant for the rest of it to spread it out. This is how you dilute your bacteria so that you can get a better control. And so I picked this picture because it's really freaking cool. I like it. So what my preliminary testing was is taking different materials, a cotton mask, 3D printed mask, a glass bowl, a metal spoon, my shirt, my fingernails, and there's some other things. But those 7 are the most important ones. And then I swabbed them and put them in Petri dishes. Now the fun fact is at my lab I make the Petri dishes. I made 50 of them just the other day because I went through 75 for all my testing. But the ones I used I purchased from Amazon because I didn't have access to the lab during certain times of COVID, so I had to buy them from Amazon, which is fine. I mean, they're easy to make. But what I did was I took the mask, I swabbed one side, put it in the Petri dish, swabbed another side, and put it in the Petri dish, and then I did a glass bowl and all the other things and let them grow. Optimal temperature was 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and let them grow for 4 days to get all the nasties. And then what I did was I cleaned the 3D printed mask first with rubbing alcohol on one side, swabbed it, and then I cleaned it like I was doing dishes, soapy water, and then swabbed the other side, and then cultured it. And what we ended up with was some really cool, I have some really cool pictures of the growth, and it will help support how and prove that you can sanitize 3D printed parts. This was just not a fly-by-night experiment. I used tons of Petri dishes. I spent tons of time doing this, and I'm doing this for the whole community in 3D printing and the microbiology department because there's really no solid science or report out there saying that it's food safe or not. And if it is food safe, why? And if it's not food safe, why? Or it's food safe up to a certain point. but then it's not because of these conditions. So that's my whole point of this video series, is to debunk all those myths or prove that you can't sanitize them or that it's not food safe. So one of those two things is going to happen. Anyways, thank you for watching, and as usual, stay safe, and I'll see you on the flip side.